Today we're checking out what I consider to be an absolute heavy metal holy grail guitar, an early 2000 Gibson custom shop Tony Iommi signature SG. These guitars were limited to somewhere between 250 and 255 units. These signature series guitars were originally produced by the Gibson custom shop for Tony Iommi in 1997. Two separate finishes, this dark red wine finish and a black ebony finish. That captures it pretty well. On the secondary camera here, it looks a lot more red. Strangely enough, this is almost the color I remember seeing when Tony played it live throughout the 90s on those original Black Sabbath reunion tours. The black one that he's played heavily throughout the years was given to Tony in July, August of 1997. That one actually is identical to this one, except for features a Gibson crown inlay on the headstock. And then the red one was finished a few months later, which is identical to this one here, featuring Tony's signature on the headstock. That was given to Tony in October of that same year. Now, both the wine red and ebony prototypes became two of Tony's main touring guitars for the original Black Sabbath reunion tours in the late 90s into the early 2000s. Now, I really discovered Black Sabbath in the summer of 1998, and the reason I remember that is because the reunion CD came out in October of that year, and I got it for Christmas. Subsequent to the release of the CD, sometime in either late 1999 or into 2000, Black Sabbath released their reunion VHS at the time, which documented Black Sabbath's 1999 Ozfest reunion tour, but I got that VHS when it came out, and my friends and I just watched it countless times. We would just get some beers on a Friday night in high school and watch that thing, and I've probably seen it 100 times. So throughout that VHS, he's playing this guitar about 80% of the time, and that just imprinted in my mind that this was the Iommi guitar, and it kind of just became my dream guitar. I was obsessed with it, but way out of reach for me even at the time. Even if these were probably selling for $3,500, I was in high school. You know, I had nowhere near that kind of money. Again, just way out of my price range. The only thing I could afford was one of the pickups, and I bought a Tony Iommi signature bridge pickup to put in my BC Rich Platinum Series bitch at the time. And then a few years later, around 2005, once I finally had a real job, was making some money, I bought the Epohone Tony Iommi signature G400, which also had these pickups. There is no current documentation on how many of each finish were produced. Some tend to say that the wine red is more rare, but that's really not verified. The only thing you could say is Gibson has released black or ebony versions of Iommi SGs of various types featuring these pickups, including two Epiphones and a Gibson USA model. So there's a lot of black Iommi guitars out there, including these original custom shop guitars, but really the only wine red editions of any Iommi guitars that exist with these pickups certainly are these original late 90s, 1999 through 2003 custom shop signature SGs. Serial numbers for these things are written on the back of the headstock. You can see this is TI 167, so the 167th guitar in the production run. Pricing on these has gone through the roof over the past several years. There's one of these up in Canada right now for $21,500, I think in Montreal. That's TI 235. So seemingly very out of range in terms of price. I've seen them sell for $15,000, $14,000, but they really don't come up very often, especially the wine red editions. So you're probably wondering, how did I get my hands on such a rare and valuable guitar? Well, about a year ago, this one popped up right at $20,000, so $19,999, which is way out of my price range. Not anything I would ever pay for a guitar, no matter how cool, no matter how much of a holy grail it would be. But one thing that I did notice was that this guitar was located in Benson, North Carolina. Me being in Charlotte, somewhat close, close enough that we could meet up and do a trade of some sort. And so I reached out to the seller and just let him know, hey, my name's Steve. I run this Does It Doom YouTube channel. Huge Doom guy, huge fan of Iommi. Your price is way out of my range, but, maybe someday we can work out some sort of trade or something, because I would love to own that guitar. And he kind of wrote back and said, yeah, that's the price. And I was just way out of the ballpark. So fast forward about a year, I'd been watching the guitar, checked it out ever so often. It was in a pretty neglected state, I will say. The fretboard had not been conditioned in forever. The inlays were heavily tarnished. The body was pretty dirty and the pickups were all grimy. So it wasn't like a pristine closet queen or anything. It had been played. And I saw the price start to drop, and it went down to $17,500. Then it dropped to $12,500, which again, still out of my price range, but now I'm starting to think, okay, now maybe we're getting into the range where we can work something out. So I reached out to the seller, who actually had the guitar on consignment. It was Spencer at Elevation Music Supply in Benson, North Carolina. We just started talking possible trade deals. I let him know what I had in terms of nice Gibsons that would be valuable enough to work towards something like this, and ended up trading my beloved 1991 Tobacco Sunburst Gibson Les Paul Standard, which is actually the longest standing guitar in my collection. I had that guitar since probably about 2010, so roughly 15 years, which for me is a long time to own a single guitar, as well as a recently acquired 2002 Tony Iommi USA Signature SG. His client seemed interested. I was able to put some cash on top, and was able to get my hands on what you see here today, which I think was a fair deal. And the reason I say that is because there is an ebony one on eBay right now for $8,500 cash. A little heavier playware than this one perhaps, and it is black, so maybe less rare, but I think that one is priced extremely fair. So I thought the deal we put together for this one was pretty fair. Now, if the one on Reverb goes for $21,500, then obviously this is worth far more, but that one's been sitting for a long time. But again, huge thank you to Spencer for working with me. I know that Les Paul that we traded has already sold. He's got that black SG up on, the black Iommi SG up on Reverb. I loved that thing. It played absolutely phenomenal. Sounded amazing. If you heard it in last week's Walpurgis Volume 2 demo, things sounded phenomenal. Was probably the best tone sample on that demo. If you're in the area or surfing Reverb and you see a 2002 Iommi Signature SG with a yellow lined non-original case, that's the one. It is a killer guitar. One interesting thing to note is the first half of the batch did not come with certificates of authenticity. The second half of the batch did. As far as I can tell, the first guitar to show up with a COA is TI-180. So this was before the certificates were issued, and I think the certificates became a thing in the late 2000s, which leads me to believe, based on the production number, that this is an early 2000. So now more of the features and specs. One of the standout features here that jumps right out at you, and certainly did as a kid to me, is the Tony Iommi signature pickups here. These are identical. They didn't really do a neck and bridge. They just did a single pickup, and just put it in the neck and bridge. So they both meter out right around 15.3k ohms. So these pickups were actually reverse engineered from the bridge pickup in Tony's JD Old Boy. I believe it's a Magnum is what they call it. They took the guitar, brought it out to Gibson in Nashville in 1997, and basically took as many measurements as they could on the pickup. They came up with a run of sample pickups to show Tony. He went home with an SG loaded up with a pickup, and I think 12 extra pickups for him to test and decide which he thought sounded most similar to his original Old Boy bridge pickup. Now these are composed of a combination of Alnico 2 and ceramic magnets, and like I said, they meter out at 15.3k ohms. I know at the time they were the hottest pickups that Gibson had ever produced, and I imagine that actually probably still holds true through today. It is a solid piece of beautifully figured mahogany on the body and neck. Chrome hardware on here with a vintage style ABR1 bridge. Control layout is typical of an SG, with one interesting aspect being that the jack, rather than being on the top position, is side mounted like an 80s SG. I really love that feature. All through the 70s and 80s, Gibson had gone away from the deep beveling in the horn area, and apparently in 1997, the prototypes for these guitars were the first guitars to once again feature true 60s style deep beveling on the horns. In addition, they also featured a smooth style neck heel, which is true of I think 61 to 63 Gibson SGs. We've got a slim taper neck profile, custom shop logo here on the back of the headstock, a set of Spurzell locking tuners, which are fairly crucial considering the ultralight string gauges Tony runs. You've got a fat 80s style headstock, one of my favorite features of this guitar. And then you've obviously got a mother of pearl Gibson logo with a water slide Tony Iommi signature decal, graphite nut. And then of course that brings us to one of the coolest features of this guitar overall is the 24 fret ebony fingerboard with sterling silver Tony Iommi cross inlays. So if you caught any of the short videos that I released restoring this thing over the past couple weeks, the fretboard and the sterling silver crosses were in a serious state of, I guess you would call it just neglect or disrepair. The inlays were all blacked with tarnish. The board was bone dry, the frets were heavily corroded. It was just in a desperate need of a deep clean. So yeah, I polished everything back up to a mirror shine, making this thing look exactly as it should. As far as weight goes, it weighs 7.6 pounds. It has what I would consider mild neck dive, but overall really good for an SG, especially considering the weight of these locking tuners and the large headstock. Not anything significant in terms of neck dive overall. Finally, it came in this Gibson custom shop case, super plush and classy looking. The only things inside the case, as I mentioned, no certificate of authenticity for 167 as far as I can tell. And if anyone can correct me on that, if you can find one of these guitars that is at or before 167 with a certificate of authenticity, I'd love to see it to know if it's missing or not. As far as I can tell, there was no COA until at least around TI 180. But you got your truss rod adjustment tool, your care guide, and your warranty card, which features the serial number. As far as the setup goes, at least for this demo, I went with a set of Labella Iommi signature drop C-sharp strings for C-sharp standard tuning. Extremely light for Tony to accommodate his prosthetic fingertips, but I feel like the super light gauge strings really add something to the mid-range, make the mids pop, and they also are a tremendous part of his signature wobbly, really fast and tight vibrato. So I have to say this thing holds tune phenomenally well. I don't know if it's the graphite nut, the locking tuners, or the strings themselves, because I have to say my Monkey SG, which I've also used these strings on, similarly holds tune really well, which has me more and more interested in labella strings. I've been putting them on more of my guitars, so I'll leave a link if you want to check out Tony's signature strings. They also have a set for standard tuning here over on the Labella website, but really impressed with both string packs. You'll notice 2 killer vintage Laney supergroups behind me, but the entirety of this demo was actually recorded with the Walpurgis Volume 2 running directly into an old Carvin FET 401 solid state power amp. These things just dropped a couple weeks back. I'm not sure if they'll actually be in stock, but you could check out our website, doesitdoom.com. I'll have a link in the description. Really fun pedal if you want to jam on some classic Iommi style tones and geezer tones, even up through the modern era. We've got the various inputs, just a really fun and awesome sounding pedal. Check them out. So one sad element of this story that I have to mention is Tony's original wine red signature SG from 1997 was actually stolen at a 2010 Heaven and Hell tribute gig and has never to this day been recovered. So shame on whoever the fuck would steal from the Riff Lord. What an absolute deplorable thing to do, to steal one of Tony's guitars. Just an unimaginable thing. But someone somewhere has the original #1 of these guitars. Would you love to see Gibson reissue this guitar in some shape or form? I think they could do a really wicked custom shop edition based on photos that are around of this. You know, they could move the strap button to the horn tip like Tony did. They could put some big Bakelite knobs on it. Otherwise, it was pretty stock in terms of how he ran both the red and the black one. I think a custom shop version would kill for them. The Monkey has already obviously kind of died down at this point, but I think they could do a new signature run of these things and people would love it. They could do a USA version and maybe instead of sterling silver, you know, just do regular inlays or mother of pearl or something, and reissue the Iommi pickup, since these have been out of production since they probably did the Epohone version of this. So if you think it's time for a new Iommi signature guitar in this style, let me know in the comments. I'm also curious to know, what's your dream guitar? This is obviously one of mine. Not a guitar I ever imagined owning again because of just how expensive they've become in recent years. But I'd love to know, what is your dream guitar? Do you own it? Have you ever had a chance to play it? Let me know down in the comments. As always, I want to send out a big thank you to all of our Patreon members, with a special thanks to our Riff Lord and Riff Messiah tier producers. For another video just like this, you can click the YouTube card directly below me. And until next time, always remember, Tony Iommi is your friend.